Hello, theorists. Today we're talking about minor scales. We did major scales live in class on Friday, and now we're going to talk about minor. And they're really not that different from major. They're a little less familiar, and they take a little bit of learning. But let's do a quick review. Remember last night, by the way, my daughter made me this blackboard thing. It's so cool. That's a C major scale. And I notice I put the numbers of each degree of the scale with a little caret. That's how the book does it. And it's a whole step, a half step. That's our first tetrachord, and then a whole step between them, and then another whole step, half step, and that's major. Now, there's no reason that we have to start on that first note. Starting on C, we get a major scale, but what if we start on a different note? What if we start on 6? Now, you're thinking about 6, that's counting up 6, that's the hard way to do it. Let's count down just 2 notes. So we go 8, 7, 6. Let's go down 2 notes, and we get a whole new scale, in this case starting on A instead of C. Give me a second to mark that. I'm writing it in now. So I'm going backwards, and I'll show it to you in a second. Just going backwards for 2 notes. So what would have been 6 and 7 is now 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll show you in just a second. So now we have in red, the new scale. All I did is I started it 2 notes lower. So you've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. That's what we call the natural minor. It's natural because we changed nothing. We just took the scale C, started it 2 notes down in the same scale, and we get a very different sound. It's do, re, mi, fa, sol. Very different from do, re, mi, fa, sol. And if we look at the intervals, we see that the first 4 notes, it's a whole step, half step, whole step. Different from major. Major was whole step, half step. This is whole step, half step, whole step. And then there's a whole step between the 2 tetrachords, and then the top tetrachord's weird. It's half step, whole step, whole step. It's what we call Phrygian tetrachords. We have a minor and a Phrygian. Don't worry about that Phrygian word now. We learn it later. But you've got these 2 other tetrachords, which gives it a very sort of dark and mournful sound, very beautiful sound. And that's our natural minor. Now, we call this is when you have 2 natural minor and a major with the same key signature. So the major starts on 1 note. The minor starts 2 notes down, where it's a major and then a minor whole step, half step. And that down there, this is the relative minor to the major, or this is the relative major to the minor. We can either count up, whole step, half step, or count down, half step, whole step, and we get the exact same, we get the minor scale or the major scale that has exactly the same key signature. Parallel minor and parallel major. All right, so that's the start of minor. How easy is that? That's simple, but minor gets a little more confusing. And the reason is that it turns out with minor, you don't have that 7th degree of the scale. Remember in major scales, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It drives us to do. And minor doesn't have that, so the harmonies have much less power. So what they did, composers, 300, 400 years ago, is they decided that when they wanted power, which was 90% of the time, they would change that second to last, that 7th note. They would sharp it. They would raise it half a step to make the harmony work. And because of that, we call that scale the harmonic minor. Now, very rarely does someone write actually in harmonic minor. Let me show you what it looks like. Whoop. That color isn't showing up very well, but all you do is you go to the 7th degree of your minor scale. That's right here, and you raise it a half a step. So now you've got this beautiful leading tone, and the harmonies work. So that's harmonic minor. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, lo. But it's got that weird jump here between, in this case, the F and the G sharp, between 6 and 7. And so it's really awkward to write a melody that way because it always sounds exotic or like it's coming from maybe Western Asia. And it's very hard to make that work. So then composers said, well, if I'm writing a melody, if I'm going to sharp 7, I'll sharp 6 too. So, wait a second. They take the 6th degree of the scale, and they put a sharp in front of it. So now, the top part of the scale looks like a major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But that makes for a very smooth melody. Now, in melodic minor, when we practice these scales, we always take the sharps going up, and then we play it downward as if it's natural. We take the sharps out because the sharp is only needed when we're driving up to that tonic, the last note, the eighth note. And so we get used to, when we're going down, to play it as a natural, and we get the real minor sound. So we say that there are three scales for minor: the natural minor with no sharps added, the harmonic minor with the seventh degree sharp, and the melodic minor with the sixth and seventh sharps going up and natural coming down. But from a practical point of view, what there really is there's a scale, the natural minor. To make the harmony work, we sometimes sharp that seventh note. To make the melody smoother, when we sharp the seventh, we also sometimes sharp the sixth. So it isn't really three scales, it's three different reasons. So we can have a sixth note natural or sharp, seventh note natural or sharp. And remember, if the note's already flat, if we say sharp it, we just mean raise it half a step. We take the flat away and replace it with the natural. It's the same thing as taking a natural and making it a sharp, or taking a sharp and making it a double sharp. So that's basically our minor scales, and we can figure them out for any scale. Let's take, for example, the key of E flat. The key of E flat, which I'll write while we're here, take my word for it, the major scale in the key of E flat has three flats. So if I'm going to write a major scale, I put three flats in my key signature, and then I write an E flat major scale. I just start on E and go up my scale, and I get a major scale on E. And we talked about this in class. So there's my E flat major scale. You see what I mean? I've just taken the key signature. Whoops, get the key signature in the picture. And then I put the notes up there, E going up. But here's what's interesting. Now, what minor would that be? Well, we want to go down to the three notes, E flat, D, C. I go 8, 7, 6, half step, whole step, right? So we find out if we want to be in minor, we start on a C. So I'm just going to put that in so we can see it. So that's not shocking. We see that C minor, you can see it there, is the relative minor of E flat major, or E flat major is the relative major of C minor. They have the same key signature. That's great. But here's what's interesting. So I have C minor has three flats. C major is up above it, no sharps or flats. So we call those two, one's the major and one's the minor, and they're starting on the same note. We call those parallel major and parallel minor because they start on the same note, as opposed to relative, where they have the same key signature. And so how do you make a parallel major or minor? Well, to convert major, like key of C, with no sharps or flats, to minor, you just add three flats. If you put three extra flats in the key signature, you now have the parallel minor. So, for example, the key of D has two sharps. So when we add three flats, we really do is we take away the first two sharps. Remember, flatting a note's the same as taking away a sharp. And then we add the third flat. So key of D would have D major, the parallel minor, would be D minor. It would have one flat, so it would be the same key signature as the key of F, which would be the relative major. And you can see that would be true because it's from D, whole step ups at E, half steps at F. Oh my gosh, everything works. Now, I went through that really quickly. I tried to show you on the board, but practice a little, read the book, and then if you find yourself a little confused between parallel and relative and this idea of going up or down, a whole step and a half step to figure it out, bring it up in class. We'll have a nice talk about it. It'll eventually become absolutely clear. In the meantime, have a great weekend, and I see you on Monday.